deadliest warrior fell in less than a minute, not to brute force but to a quiet, unarmed human cadet. In a universe ruled by strength, one young woman changed everything, with knowledge, precision, and a single, calculated strike. This isn't just a fight story. It's a story about what happens when power meets purpose, and why the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy might just be a calm mind. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The Galactic Unity Council had existed for over 10,000 years, though no one could quite agree on the exact number. That was the way things worked in the council. Long speeches, careful translations, and debates that went in circles until someone gave up. It was made up of over 500 intelligent species, each from a different world, and each with their own unique way of understanding life, war, peace, and power. Somehow, they had all managed to live without destroying one another, though not without moments of tension. But today the chamber was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that meant something strange was about to happen. Counselors from across the stars gathered around a wide, glowing table, watching a giant screen hovering in the air. A trial was about to begin, one of the final exams for the Galactic Military Academy, where only the strongest and most promising cadets were tested in combat. Normally this was a routine matter, but today was different. Today a human cadet was participating. Most of the council found this amusing, or at least surprising. A few found it alarming. Counselor Retarn, a cold-blooded creature with scales, like obsidian glass, could barely contain his frustration. He paced behind his floating chair, his voice sharp and bitter. "We are seriously allowing a human into the final combat trial?" he asked no one in particular. "This is madness." Others chuckled, not out of disrespect, but because Retarn always acted like the galaxy would end over the smallest breach of tradition. Ambassador Quilly, a translucent floating being from the water moon Nevrex, tilted her shimmering body forward. "She passed all the tests, Retarn. She earned her place. What's the harm in letting her try?" Retarn slammed one clawed hand against the side of the table. "She's from a death world. Their planet is chaos. Their oceans are filled with monsters. Their skies spit fire, and their weather can peel the skin off your bones. And still, they call it home." But no one answered him. Instead, all eyes turned to the center of the screen where a name appeared: Cadet Lena Voss, Earth. No one had noticed her much during the year. She didn't stand out in the way some cadets did. She didn't win the combat simulations with speed or strength. She didn't shout or show off. She was quiet, focused. She spent hours in the Academy's archives reading, learning, watching replays of past combat trials. While others trained with blades and drones, she sat with a tablet, marking pages, tapping notes. Some thought she was just trying to pass without making a fool of herself. No one expected her to reach the final trial. And yet, she had. Lena's background puzzled many. Before joining the Academy, she had been a veterinarian on Earth. Not a soldier, not a spy, not a fighter. She treated sick animals, rescued injured wildlife, worked at a conservation center where she handled everything from birds to beasts that could crush cars. Her application had been clean, her references strong, and her test scores just high enough. It was her essays that had stood out, her deep understanding of alien biology, her curiosity, and her thoughtful analysis of combat behavior across species. Now, she was about to face the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy in front of thousands of spectators and a council that didn't believe she belonged there. Counselor Retarn sneered as the camera showed her standing calmly at the edge of the arena. "No claws, no armor, not even any weapons. Just look at her. She's going to get destroyed." But others watched in silence, their thoughts harder to read. Ambassador Quilly floated still, her glowing tendrils curling inward in quiet curiosity. Chancellor Burrell, a tall, plant-like being who had seen more trials than most, leaned forward slowly, eyes fixed on the small human girl. Lena stood alone in the arena, her boots steady on the smooth metal floor. Her uniform was standard issue, except for a few extra pockets humans always liked carrying. things. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat ponytail, and her expression was unreadable. She didn't look afraid. She didn't look excited. She simply waited, as if she had done this 100 times before. Far across the arena, a gate began to rise with a heavy, echoing hum. Behind it stood her opponent, General Brogor of the Scarthan Empire, a towering figure covered in armored plates that shimmered like oil under the lights. His claws scraped the ground. His tail twitched in anticipation. His breath was heavy. Steam. He had never been beaten, not once, in over 200 official matches. He was taller than two humans stacked together, and his body was built for war. And yet, Lena didn't move. She stood still, breathing slowly, waiting for the moment. She had studied every species allowed in combat trials. She had mapped their weaknesses, their neural pathways, their biology, not just in theory. She had trained her hands on Earth's most dangerous creatures. Her knowledge wasn't just from books. It was from life, from touch, from saving things others didn't understand. The screen above the council lit up with a countdown. 10 seconds until the trial began. Counselor Retarn folded his arms. She won't last 10 seconds. No one responded. Lena Voss lowered her chin slightly and took one quiet step forward. The timer hit 0. The arena echoed with sound, and the trial began. The arena was silent, but it was the kind of silence that pressed on your chest like a weight. Around the massive floating platform, thousands of spectators from dozens of species held their breath. In the heart of it all, Cadet Lena Voss stood completely still. Across from her, General Brogor began to move. Brogor didn't walk. He stomped. Each step made the arena tremble. His feet, covered in thick, jagged armor, struck the metal floor with booming force. His scales caught the light, making him look like a living statue carved from storm clouds and stone. He was enormous, nearly twice Lena's height, and built like he had been designed to break anything that stood in his way. The crowd reacted the moment he stepped forward. Gasps, shouts, even a few nervous whimpers came from the upper balconies. The council chamber, miles away and connected by holographic stream, was filled with blinking lights and murmuring voices. The counselors watched with wide eyes, barely remembering to blink. Counselor Retarn's jaws clenched tightly. "Now," he whispered. "Now they'll see how foolish this was." Lena didn't move. She watched Brogor approach with calm, almost casual focus. Her posture didn't shift. Her arms stayed loose at her sides. Her breathing remained slow and steady. The camera zoomed in on her face. She looked more curious than afraid, like someone studying a rare animal instead of preparing to fight. The announcer's voice echoed over the arena. "Combat trial commencing. Combatants Cadet Lena Voss of Earth, General Brogor of the Scarthan Empire. Combat continues until surrender or incapacitation. Lethal force permitted but discouraged. Begin." Brogor didn't hesitate. He roared, a deep, thunderous sound that rolled across the arena like a crashing wave. Then he charged. The sight of a creature that size moving so fast was terrifying. His legs pounded the ground. His claws were out, sharp and gleaming. His tail swiped behind him like a weapon of its own. Even from a distance, the force of his motion could be felt. And still, Lena didn't move. She stood in place, watching, waiting. In the council chamber, Counselor Quilly's tendrils twitched with anxiety. Chancellor Birrell tilted her head slightly. "She's not reacting," someone whispered. "She's going to freeze." But Lena wasn't frozen. Her eyes were tracking Brogor's movement, calculating. She had studied his species for months. She had memorized every battle he'd ever fought, noted every pattern, every habit, every pause between attacks. She wasn't just watching him, she was reading him like a book. When Brogor was just a few meters away, Lena moved. It was a simple step, a smooth pivot to the side, just enough to avoid the full force of his charge. Brogor didn't stop in time. His momentum carried him forward, and he skidded slightly, surprised. He spun around with a growl, claws raised again, ready to strike. But Lena didn't attack. She didn't even take a fighting stance. She tilted her head and said, in a clear voice, "Quick question. Do Scarthan males still have those pressure valves behind the second rib cage? Left side?" Brogor blinked. It wasn't a question he expected. Not in a combat trial. Not in the middle of a fight. He hesitated for just a second. Just long enough. Lena's next movement was small, fast, and precise. She took a single step, closer, and reached out with her hand. Not to punch, not to strike, but to press her fingers just under Brogor's left arm. A soft spot, hidden under armor, invisible to the untrained eye. The result was immediate. Brogor dropped. It wasn't slow. His legs folded, his eyes rolled back, and his body collapsed to the floor with a heavy crash. The platform trembled beneath his weight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. On the council's screen, multiple species stared open-mouthed. Retarn stood frozen, 6 claws still gripping the edge of his console. For a moment, no one spoke. The entire arena was still. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Lena stepped back, her hands by her sides again. She didn't look proud. She didn't look surprised. She simply watched Brogor with quiet attention, like a doctor waiting to see if a patient's pulse would return. 40 seconds passed. Then Brogor's fingers twitched. His head lifted slowly. He blinked several times, clearly dazed. Then finally, in a weak, gravelly voice, he said, "Surrender." The trial ended. The arena lights shifted color, signaling completion. Medical drones rushed to Brogor's side. The announcer's voice returned, this time sounding almost confused. Trial concluded. Victory, Cadet Lena Voss. Duration 47 seconds. The crowd erupted in noise. Shock, amazement, confusion, applause. Somewhere someone shouted, "Replay it." And the screens lit up with instant slow-motion replays. In the council chamber, Councillor Retarn looked like he might fall over. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Others were already pulling up files, trying to understand what just happened. "That pressure point," one councillor whispered. "It's not public knowledge. How did she know that?" Ambassador Quilly spoke, her voice calm but serious. "She studied. She prepared." Chancellor Burrell nodded. "And she waited for the perfect moment. Not strength, not speed, precision." As the council buzzed with new conversation, Cadet Lena Voss stood quietly in the arena, untouched, unhurt, and perfectly calm. The storm had passed, and in the silence that followed, no one laughed anymore. In the moments after General Brogor surrendered, a strange calm settled over the arena. It was not the kind of calm that followed peace, but the stillness that came from confusion, awe, and disbelief. Cadet Lena Voss stood at the center of it all, her back straight, her face calm, and her hands resting quietly at her sides. Around her, the world seemed to be holding its breath. Brogor remained on the floor, blinking slowly. His chest rose and fell with deep, controlled breaths. The medical drone scanned him quickly, confirming that he had no serious injuries. His nervous system, however, had temporarily shut down due to a strike so precise that it bypassed his natural defenses. The drones began their work, applying pulses of low-frequency energy to restart his movement. But Brogor didn't look angry. He didn't even look embarrassed. He looked thoughtful. Back in the council chamber, silence still clung to the air. Dozens of councillors sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud or question everything they thought they knew. Retarn had not moved since the trial ended. His eyes were fixed on the screen, watching the replay for the 4th time. Each time, he saw the same thing. Lena stepping to the side, asking her strange question, and landing her strike, with exact precision. There was no hesitation, no fear. Just a clean, controlled action. Ambassador Quilly broke the silence first. "That location," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper. "That pressure point is protected knowledge. Not even most military doctors are trained to strike there." Chancellor Burrell turned slowly to her. "Then how did she know it?" Across the chamber, a younger counselor pulled up Lena's academy records. She spent over 160 hours in the xenobiology archives. She requested access to every document related to Scarthan physiology, including early medical studies and outdated field manuals. Why would she go through that trouble? Another counselor asked. A voice came from behind them, soft but certain. Because she wasn't training to fight. She was training to understand. Everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was High Instructor Norin, one of the oldest members of the Academy staff. He had taught generations of cadets, watched them rise, fall, and sometimes vanish from memory. He knew the signs of a true strategist, and in Lena, he had seen something few others noticed. She studied more than anyone else, Norin continued. She asked better questions. She didn't want to know how to defeat enemies. She wanted to know how they moved, how they thought, how their bodies responded under pressure. She wasn't preparing for this trial. She was preparing for whatever came after. The council absorbed this slowly. Retarn, still staring at the screen, finally muttered, "This was no accident. This wasn't luck." "No," Quilly agreed. "It was precision." Back in the arena, Brogor had regained control of his arms. He pushed himself into a sitting position, muscles still trembling slightly from the impact. Lena walked over to him, not with pride or victory in her steps, but with calm concern. She knelt beside him and checked one of the scanner readouts. The medical drones moved out of her way, recognizing her presence as helpful rather than intrusive. "You'll feel numb in your left arm for a few more minutes," she said gently, "but there's no permanent damage. Your central nervous flow is already recovering." Brogor looked at her with wide, thoughtful eyes. "You knew exactly where to strike." Lena nodded. "I've studied Scarthan anatomy for the past 6 months. Your kind has a narrow nerve cluster between the 3rd and 4th armor plates. It's rarely mentioned in modern combat manuals." Brogor blinked. "Why would a cadet, no, why would anyone, spend time learning that?" "Because you're not just a target," she replied. "You're a living being with a body, a mind, and a history. Understanding that means more than knowing how to hurt someone. It means knowing when not to." He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the arena. It surprised everyone watching, even the counselors who had seen him fight dozens of times. He shook his head slowly, smiling in a way no one expected from a creature his size. "You could have ended me," he said. "Instead, you chose a strike that only disabled me temporarily." Lena tilted her head. "I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to prove I didn't have to destroy you to succeed." In the council chamber, that one sentence struck harder than any weapon. A murmur ran through the rows of seats. Counselor Retarn finally leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if questioning everything he had believed about power and strength. Chancellor Burrell stood and addressed the room. "We speak often of peace, yet we train our best minds in the art of war. Perhaps it's time we learn from those who seek a different path." There were nods. Some unsure, some slow, but growing in number. The story of Lena Voss was no longer just about a cadet winning a trial. It was about someone who had changed the meaning of victory itself. As Brogor stood with Lena's help, the crowd cheered, not just for the outcome, but for the message that echoed through the stars, that sometimes the quietest strike can be the most powerful of all. As the echoes of the crowd's cheering faded into the background, General Brogor stood tall once more. Though his movements were slower, there was no anger in his eyes, only wonder. Cadet Lena Voss stood beside him, hands still at her sides, not seeking praise or victory. She simply watched, making sure the effects of the strike were fading just as she had predicted. The two of them stood alone on the wide platform, surrounded by invisible gazes from across the galaxy. And then, in a quiet voice that barely rose, above the soft hum of the arena systems, Brogor spoke again. "I want to learn that technique." The words, spoken by a warrior known for destruction, took everyone by surprise. In the council chamber, conversations stopped again. "Counselor." Retarn blinked slowly, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Ambassador Quilly leaned forward, glowing faintly in surprise. Lena didn't seem shocked. Instead, she gave a small, respectful nod. "I'll teach you," she said, "but only if you promise never to use it to harm someone who can't fight. Back?" Brogor let out a low laugh, one hand resting against his side where she had struck. "That seems fair." Together, they walked from the center of the arena toward the exit. It was a quiet walk, but it spoke louder than any speech. A cadet and a warlord, a student and a legend. But more than anything, two people who had discovered something new about each other and about themselves. The counselors, watching from their distant seats, saw it too. In the chambers, discussion had already begun. Chancellor Birrell stood once more, this time addressing the entire assembly with a calm, commanding presence. "We have witnessed something unusual today," she said. "Not a test of strength, but a test of wisdom. Not brute force, but deep preparation and restraint." Counselor Redharn finally spoke, though his tone was no longer angry. It was quiet, thoughtful. She didn't beat him with weapons. She didn't even harm him. And yet, she won. "Yes," replied High Instructor Norin. "She won by choosing not to destroy." The room fell into thoughtful silence. Then Ambassador Quilly floated upward, tendrils moving like flowing water. "I propose we offer Cadet Voss an immediate advancement in rank. Let her continue her training, but not just as a student. Let her help us build something new, something that values knowledge as highly as combat." "I second that," said Birrell, without hesitation. Others followed. The motion passed before anyone could object, and even Redharn, after a long pause, raised his hand with a quiet sigh. News spread fast. Across the stars, on planets where the Council's decisions were followed closely, Lena's victory became more than a headline. It became a story. A young woman from a dangerous planet who used compassion and understanding instead of aggression. A warrior who fought with care. She became a symbol of something different, a reminder that power could take many forms. Later, that day, Lena visited Brogor in the medical wing of the arena complex. He was resting but alert, watching a projection of their match on a small screen. He turned to her when she entered and gave a nod of respect. "I've fought 100 enemies," he said, "but none of them made me pause the way you did." "You're not an enemy," Lena said. "You're a partner in this test. We both walked in knowing the rules." He studied her for a moment. "You humans are strange." Lena smiled softly. "Only because you're just getting to know us." They talked for a long while, not just about the match, but about their worlds, their people, and their pasts. Lena explained how she had worked with large animals on Earth, elephants, big cats, even Komodo dragons. She told him how she'd studied nerve maps, how she'd once calmed a charging rhino with nothing more than a pressure hold and patience. Brogor listened with fascination. To him, her experience sounded more dangerous than most battles. "You see danger," she said, "but I see patterns, reactions, systems. When we understand those, we don't have to fight to win. We just need to respond the right way at the right time." Brogor nodded slowly. "I would like to learn more of that. Maybe others will too." "They can," she said. "We just need to start teaching." And so they did. In the following weeks, a new program was launched. Joint combat studies led by human instructors and supported by species from across the galaxy. Lena became the first cadet in Council history to teach alongside the very generals she once studied. She created materials, shared methods, and showed that strength didn't always roar. It sometimes whispered. Back on Earth, her story became a spark for young people who dreamed of doing more than fighting. They began to believe they could change the world without weapons, that understanding their opponent was sometimes more powerful than defeating them. Veterans, scientists, and scholars reached out from across the stars to thank her for reminding them of something they'd forgotten. That intelligence, empathy, and patience were just as important on the battlefield as bravery and strength. One day during a quiet training session, Brogor turned to Lena and asked, "Do you think others will follow your path?" She paused, then shrugged. Some will, some won't. But if even one person learns that victory doesn't have to mean destruction, then that's enough for me. The great warlord nodded. You've changed more than the scoreboards, Lena. You've changed us. She looked up at him, her voice soft. We're not meant to just survive, Brogor. We're meant to understand. That's how peace begins. In the quiet that followed, nothing more needed to be said.